On a frigid Monday morning, Courtroom 3A at the Providence Municipal Court was so packed that I had to pause for a moment before taking my seat on the bench. On both sides of the aisle, reporters jostled for position with their cameras raised, flashes popping non-stop, while the local residents sat perfectly still, as if all their pent-up frustration had been building for far too long and was now waiting for this very moment to finally be addressed. I could clearly feel the weight of every gaze fixed on me, a sense of anticipation, urgency, and the hope that today the court would speak on their behalf, and I knew that what I was about to confront was no ordinary traffic violation. The victim was Maria Lopez, 34 years old, an immigrant worker who was pushing a stroller with her 18-month-old baby along West Broadway on a Friday afternoon in September when disaster nearly struck her and her child. The defendant was Ariana Velasquez, 24 years old, a famous model with millions of followers, a name familiar from fashion magazines, and someone closely connected to Thomas V. Moretti, owner of the Moretti Atelier brand, an influential figure in Rhode Island's business world. The records and collected video showed Ariana driving her Audi RS7 while live streaming on TikTok, accelerating to 78 miles per hour in a crowded residential area, creating the moment when she nearly collided head-on with Maria's stroller, a scene that sent chills down the spines of everyone who witnessed it. When stopped by police, she casually remarked, "Moretti will handle everything for me," as if the law didn't apply to people with powerful connections. The live stream capturing the entire incident spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of outrage across the community and making this trial impossible to delay even one more day. And then, while every eye in the courtroom was still charged with that tension, the door opened. Ariana Velasquez entered, appearing exactly like a model striding down a red carpet, distorting the solemn atmosphere of the court with her arrogant and overly confident demeanor. She wasn't alone. Behind her was a stylist adjusting every fold on her designer coat, an assistant carrying luxury bags, and a PR manager whispering in her ear with the assured tone of someone who believed any scandal could be spun with a few press releases. Ariana wore an outfit so expensive that the reporters' flashes reflected off it in shimmering streaks like on a runway, and she herself behaved as if she were in the middle of a photo shoot rather than a courtroom, where every action, every glance carried consequences. As soon as she sat down, she leaned over to whisper to her team, loud enough for me to hear, "It's fine, Moretti will take care of it." The words were light as air but heavy with the arrogance of someone accustomed to privilege, viewing the law as merely a minor formality in her lavish life. When the clerk began reading the charges, Ariana showed no focus or concern. Instead, she smirked, a smile from someone who didn't believe any of this could affect her in the slightest. I closely observed that reaction, disdainful eyes, slightly curled lips, the attitude of a person convinced she was immune to any form of accountability. And then, as if to further assert the power of her fame, Ariana discreetly reached into her bag, pulled out her phone with its glittering metal case, opened the app and prepared to start live streaming right in the middle of the trial. The screen's light reflected on her meticulously made-up face, and her fingers moved swiftly as if preparing for her next viral content. I quietly noted everything in the record, every movement, every expression, every small action revealing the defendant's true character this morning, because in my courtroom, attitude is just as important as the violation itself, and sometimes it reveals even more. I had just set down my pen, thinking that at least she would stay quiet until cross-examination began, when Ariana stunned the entire room once more. Without waiting for permission, she leaned forward, pulled out her phone, held it up to face level, and activated the front camera with the practiced ease of someone far too used to recording herself anywhere, anytime. The light from the screen illuminated her carefully made-up face, and in just a second the courtroom space, which should have been the most sacred, turned into the personal stage of someone who lived off public attention. She aimed the camera at me, adjusted the angle as if filming for millions of viewers, then suddenly mimicked my voice, deliberately lowering her tone, and imitating how I opened the session. In my courtroom, the way she drew out the words with sarcasm caused her team behind her to chuckle, the laughter loud enough that a few people in the room turned to look, while I felt the waves of chaos spreading through the air. The stylist covered her mouth but couldn't hide her amusement, the assistant laughed while fixing Ariana's hair, and the PR manager just stood with arms crossed, eyes full of the confidence of someone who believed everything could be turned into favorable media content. I looked up immediately, her words still echoing in the air like a direct insult to the court I had presided over for more than 3 decades. I stared straight at Ariana, without raising my voice, using just the steady depth of someone who fully understood the value of discipline, and said, "Not today, not in this courtroom, and certainly not in front of me." The entire courtroom suddenly fell silent. My words cut through the laughter like a sharp blade, freezing Ariana's team in place, while she herself raised an eyebrow, as if still not grasping the seriousness of the warning. I signaled the bailiff, confiscate all recording devices in the courtroom. Ariana immediately lowered her phone, but didn't turn off the screen, looking at me defiantly with lips curved into a provocative half smile. "You know I could make this video go viral, right?" she said, her voice light but loud enough for the whole room to hear. That wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration from someone who believed fame was a weapon stronger than the law, and that a few million views could shake anyone's credibility, even a judge's. I kept my voice calm, showing no sign of being rattled. "You can think whatever you want out there, but in this courtroom the law is the only voice that carries weight, and you've just violated a fundamental rule of this court." I recorded her entire conduct in the file before me, each pen stroke deliberate, because throughout my career I've learned that courtroom demeanor reveals more than any statement ever could. Ariana looked at me, her eyes mixing surprise and irritation, as if she wasn't used to anyone telling her no. But I was far too familiar with people who thought fame could shield them from responsibility. And this morning in Courtroom 3A I ensured that no one, no matter how famous, could place themselves above the dignity of the law. I signaled the bailiff to complete the seizure of recording devices, and as the room gradually returned to order, I decided it was time for the truth to speak over any excuses. "Present the evidence," I said briefly. As soon as the first image appeared on the large screen in front, the entire courtroom sank into a thick silence so heavy I could hear the sharp breaths of a few people in the back rows. It was the live stream Ariana had recorded on the afternoon of the incident. The video millions had already seen, but today in this room it carried a completely different weight. The shaky footage appeared Ariana behind the wheel of her Audi RS7, her face full of excitement, loud laughter drowning out the roaring engine as she accelerated. "Wow, you guys see this? This thing drives amazing," she said loudly, then reading viewer comments, glancing at her phone and flooring the gas, making the camera shake violently. The speedometer numbers jumped continuously, and just seconds later the frame suddenly captured a stroller coming into view, Maria pushing her child across the street, completely unaware that catastrophe was mere inches away. In the video I heard Maria's blood-curdling scream clearly, the sound so real it made a few people in the courtroom flinch. Maria yanked the stroller close to the brick wall on the sidewalk, while Ariana's Audi whipped past right beside it, so fast the wind knocked the blanket off the stroller. Instead of slamming the brakes or showing fear, Ariana just laughed, turned the camera to the rearview mirror and said, "She's overreacting." The entire courtroom nearly froze. That wasn't an explanation, wasn't remorse. It was mockery, uttered in a moment when just 1 second slower could have cost a mother her child. I let the video play long enough for everyone to clearly see Ariana's face, radiant, smug, reckless, before requesting the next piece of evidence. On the screen appeared a TikTok Ariana posted that same evening, under the luxurious lighting of her designer bedroom. She tilted her head, gave a half smile, and said to the camera, "Little drama with a mom." Below was the caption, "Wild Friday." Upbeat music played, completely contrasting the gravity of what she had caused. No apology, no acceptance of responsibility, just light mockery, as if nearly killing a child was merely an entertaining detail in her life. The courtroom was silent, but I could feel the outrage spreading in every suppressed breath, every clenched jaw. I signaled for the third piece of evidence, a screenshot of an IG story from the night before the trial. In it, Ariana stood in front of a mirror, fixing her hair, giving a faint smile and saying, "Tomorrow meeting Judge Caprio, this'll be fun." The words came with a tilted smiling emoji, and her tone carried the teasing defiance of someone accustomed to using attention as a weapon. I looked at the screen for a few seconds, letting those words speak for the person who uttered them, then requested the final evidence. A voice message extracted from Ariana's phone under a search warrant. Her voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "Moretti told me to stay calm. I'm not worried about court. Not worried about court." 3 simple words that exposed everything. She wasn't afraid because she believed the power she relied on was greater than the law, greater than the court, and greater than other people's lives. When the voice message ended, the courtroom remained in heavy silence. No one moved. No one breathed heavily. No one needed to say anything, because what they had just seen and heard was already crystal clear. I leaned back slightly in my chair, opened the file before me, and spoke in an even, deliberate voice, each word placed carefully after years of consideration. "This evidence, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't just show dangerous conduct, it shows attitude. And sometimes it's the attitude that reveals a defendant's true character." I looked at Ariana. She was no longer smiling, but her eyes still flashed with the stubbornness of someone who had never truly faced consequences. I noted in the record, "Defendant shows no remorse upon reviewing evidence," and as the pen touched the paper, I could feel the room's breathing ease slightly. No one spoke, but everyone understood that what happened next would determine the entire course of the trial. I didn't rush, didn't say anything more, just let the silence do its work, because sometimes silence is the most powerful form of discipline. And then suddenly the sound of the door hinges rang out, shattering that thick atmosphere. The courtroom door opened, and all eyes immediately turned to the man stepping in, Thomas Fitz Moretti. No introduction needed, no advance notice, just his presence alone was enough to send a wave of quiet murmurs rippling through the entire room. The perfectly tailored dark suit, the calm stride of someone accustomed to standing among the highest echelons of power, and the sharp gaze of a man who never let anyone read his true thoughts. Many people there immediately thought he had come to save Ariana, to protect the valuable brand jewel he had nurtured. A few reporters quickly raised their cameras, ready to capture the moment worth 1,000 headlines, the fashion mogul appearing to rescue his model in the midst of the public storm. Ariana saw him too, and in that instant, her face lit up with a hope I had never seen throughout the entire trial. She sat up straighter, her lips curving into a faint smile, as if Moretti's appearance was living proof that she would never face any consequences. She turned her head and whispered to her assistant, "See, I told you," but then that confidence vanished almost immediately, as Moretti did not sit next to her nor did he lean down to whisper something in her ear. He walked straight to the position reserved for those wishing to address the court, stood right there, placed both hands on the podium, and looked at me with the eyes of someone who had thought very clearly about what he was about to say. I nodded in acknowledgement. The entire room held its breath. Moretti spoke in a deep, steady voice without a hint of hesitation. "Your Honor, I need to clarify one thing." He glanced toward Ariana, a glance not of protection but of someone reassessing a link that had reached the point of needing to be severed. "Ariana Velasquez has used my name for purposes I never consented to," he continued, each word heavy as it landed. "She told the police that I would handle everything. She said the same thing in messages. And I want to make it clear before this court that those were not words I gave, and certainly not something I would do." Ariana's eyes widened, her lips moved without forming words, while the team behind her immediately bowed their heads as if trying to shrink themselves away from everyone's gaze. But Moretti kept speaking, his voice growing even firmer. "I do not cover for any reckless behavior. I do not protect anyone who uses fame or connections to disregard the lives of others. And I certainly do not allow anyone to use my name to place themselves above the law." There were deep inhales from the rows behind. A few cameras shook slightly, not because the holders' hands were trembling, but because they hadn't expected the story to turn this way. Ariana at this point could no longer maintain her confidence. She looked at Moretti with clear panic, as if trying to reclaim a support she thought was solid, but which turned out to be just a rotting wooden bridge. "Mr. Moretti," she called softly, but he did not turn back. Not once. He continued facing me, saying clearly, "I respect the law, Your Honor, and I believe that anyone who endangers others, anyone must be held accountable." I looked at him for a long moment, and then I turned to Ariana, who was now sitting rigidly, her eyes wide open, her face drained of all color. "Did you hear that clearly, Ariana?" I said, my voice neither heavy nor light, just a truth placed exactly where it belonged. "The person you trusted to shield you, that very person has chosen justice." I paused for a beat, letting the entire courtroom fully feel that fall, then said the words I knew would linger with her for a long time. "Power chose justice, while you chose arrogance." Ariana bowed her head, but not in remorse. It was the bow of someone who for the first time understood that the privileged world she believed was inviolable only existed as long as there were people willing to hold it up. And today all of that had collapsed right in front of her, in this courtroom 3A, where fame no longer mattered, and power no longer carried weight. The atmosphere in the room settled, thick like a heavy curtain falling over everyone. I could clearly sense the anticipation in every gaze, a silence that was both solemn and tense. I sat up straight, placed both hands on the time-worn wooden desk, took a deep breath, and knew exactly what remained to be done: deliver the sentence. Everyone in the courtroom was looking at me, but Ariana's gaze was the clearest, a weight mixed with fear and helplessness, completely opposite to the arrogance she had shown when she walked in that morning. I opened the file before me, my voice low and even, letting the very words carry the weight of the law. "Ariana Velasquez," I began, "for the act of causing serious danger, the attitude of disregarding the lives of others, and the arrogance displayed in and out of this courtroom, I sentence you to 180 days in prison at the women's facility in Cranston." A few quiet murmurs arose, while Ariana remained motionless like a statue. I continued, "In addition, you are fined $25,000, to be paid directly into the Traffic Safety Fund and the Child Protection Fund of Providence." I turned to the next page. "The court also decides to revoke your driver's license for a period of 2 years, prohibit you from using TikTok and Instagram for 1 year, and require you to complete 250 hours of community service at the trauma unit of Rhode Island Hospital. Finally, you will have to record a video apologizing to the community, with the content approved by the court before release." I closed the file, then said, "That is the sentence." The entire courtroom fell silent. No one clapped, no one breathed heavily, as if everyone needed a few seconds to absorb the weight of the verdict just pronounced. I turned my gaze to Maria Lopez, who had been sitting there all morning with her hands clasped together, trembling slightly from the tension. "Maria," I said, "if you wish to share anything, the court is ready to listen." Maria stood up, her voice soft but clear, for it was the voice of a mother who had just endured a terrifying moment that no one deserves. "Your Honor," she said, "when that car came barreling toward me, I thought I had lost my child. I have never been that scared." She swallowed, her eyes welling up but without hatred. "I don't hate Ariana, I just want our neighborhood to be safe, so the children can grow up without having to see death speed past them like that." The entire room was silent, and though I had heard hundreds of emotional testimonies in my career, Maria's gaze still left a heavy mark on my heart. When she sat down, I nodded to her as a thank you. I looked back at Ariana. Everything about her now was different. No more disdainful eyes, no more sarcastic smile, no more confidence in others' power, only the emptiness of someone watching the world they knew crumble. What happened after the trial also quickly spread beyond the courtroom. Major fashion brands collectively announced the termination of contracts with Ariana. Her management company issued a statement suspending all her activities indefinitely. The press analyzed every aspect of the trial, with headlines like "Celebrity Arrogance Reaches Its Limit," or "When Fame Can't Save You from Real Consequences." In the early days of serving her sentence, Ariana remained silent. No reactions, no explanations, but according to reports from the detention facility and the community supervision unit, she complied well with all regulations, causing no difficulties for anyone. When she began her 250 hours of community service at the trauma unit, staff noted a clear change in her attitude. No more complaining, no avoiding duties, no reluctance. She witnessed real injuries, real pain, real fear, things that live streams and social media had never shown her. After completing the full 250 hours, Ariana did not leave like many others. She stayed on, requesting to continue as a volunteer without needing hours recorded. And then one afternoon, the court clerk forwarded me a letter sent from the women's facility, the handwriting neat and careful. "Dear Judge Caprio, thank you for the sentence that saved me from myself. I never understood consequences until I looked them straight in the face. I am sorry." I set the letter down on my desk and thought about everything that had happened. About Maria, about the child, about the busy streets of Providence, and about a young woman who had let fame blur all boundaries. As the trial neared its end, I looked up at the entire courtroom and said the words I believed everyone present would remember. No one is above the law. Justice does not just punish, it also saves people from the tragedy they are about to cause. The story of Ariana Velasquez is not just a dramatic trial, it clearly reflects issues that are very present in American society today, where the power of social media, fame, and powerful connections sometimes cause people to lose their sense of responsibility. Ariana believed that her 9.7 million TikTok followers and her close relationship with an influential figure like Thomas Moretti could serve as a shield protecting her from every reckless act. Her live streaming at 78 miles per hour on West Broadway, saying she's overreacting right after nearly hitting a stroller, or confidently declaring "Moretti will handle it for me," showed that she mistakenly thought fame and power could replace clear-headedness and ethics. In reality, such situations are not uncommon in American life. Cases of celebrities or influencers disregarding traffic laws, live streaming while driving, or being overconfident because of money and connections have become major topics of debate. That is why this story is a reminder that U.S. law always prioritizes lives and community safety, no matter who the offender is. Thomas Moretti's reaction is also an important lesson. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who do not tolerate the abuse of power. His public statement in court, "I do not cover for reckless behavior," caused Ariana to collapse, but it was also the necessary moment for her to face the truth. The lesson for everyone in modern American society is very clear. Fame cannot replace responsibility, social media cannot erase consequences, and power cannot stand against the truth. When Ariana was sentenced to 180 days in prison, 250 hours of service at the trauma unit, and banned from social media, it was during that process that she truly saw the real consequences of her actions, something that many young people living in the TikTok era sometimes forget. This story reminds us that if an action can harm others, even for just a moment, then it is never worth trading for a minute of fame. Thank you for following this meaningful story today. If you find this lesson helpful, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring real stories of justice in America together. See you in the next video, where we will continue witnessing how the law protects the community and changes people for the better.